Hi, everyone, and welcome to our fifth Kentico CMS podcast. I'm Thom Robbins, your host. In case you haven't seen it, we've announced Kentico Connections 2011. This year, we're going to be in two cities, Prague for those in Europe, and Denver for those in the United States and North America. We're really hoping that you'll take the time to join us. In today's podcast, I'm excited to have joining me Sean Kozy and Michael Kinkaid from Ecentricarts, a Kentico Gold partner from Canada. Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. Why don't we start by telling me a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. This is Sean at Ecentricarts. I'm the CTO at the company and one of the partners. Our studio's been around for over 10 years now, and we specialize in a mix of web and other new media development, as well as design and strategy. And having been in the business for 11 years, it's been exciting, it's been challenging, and we quite thoroughly enjoy working with great technology products and doing a lot of innovative stuff, which includes working with Kentico.
And my name's Michael. I'm a senior web application developer here at Ecentricarts. Been with the company for a couple of years now. Originally from Belfast, Northern Ireland. Came to Canada about 5 years ago. Been working with Kentico for about 4 years now. I'm a certified Kentico trainer and a developer. And I also was the technical editor on the book, which I believe you were the author of, Tom.
That's correct. Correct. So tell me, how did you guys get into technology? What's your story that brought you to where you are today?
Well, being a professional musician by trade, which is an entirely rewarding career, but a financially disastrous one, I actually got into technology through design. I originally was a mix of musicianship and artistry. So I was doing a lot of graphic arts work as a way, frankly, to augment being someone who was on the road most of the year, doing performances and studio work. And one day I just found that A, the web existed, and B, it started to take over my life. So long story short, I transitioned from being a full-time musician to being a full-time web strategist, developer, designer, architect, and now I mostly talk about and I build less because I have great people like Michael working with me.
Excellent. So what instruments do you play, Sean?
Mainly percussion and drums, and a little bit of piano, although I'm getting quite rusty at all three. So.
And how about you, Michael?
I took a year out after school back home in Northern Ireland just to work. I started pulling fiber optic cables, and I'd find myself often, this was in the dot-com bubble, going to these cool software houses in Belfast where the staff wore pajamas, played foosball tables, and basically opened up a beer at 12 o'clock. I started thinking to myself, that looks like a good career. So when it came time to pick a university course, I just got into software engineering and been working on it since.
Excellent. I understand that you guys just completed a really cool project recently on Kentico. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So we work with a company based in New York called Calico Cottage. And they, as it turns out, are the world's largest manufacturer of fudge and fudge-related products. And fudge is something that, at least in North America in particular, is a real nostalgia product. People sort of have their childhood memories of going to, Montauk or their local vacation spots and the old fudge shop being on the corner. And so it's something that's really part of, especially the American psyche. And Calico, as it turns out, is the sort of hidden brand behind a lot of fudge out there. They create fudge manufacturing equipment, they create the base products, and they help organizations who want to integrate fudge into their business figure out how to market and sell it as well as produce it, because that's a big part of the experience. You go into your local candy store and there's the fudge counter with the fudge kettle. So they've engaged us actually to basically take fudge into the 21st century, looking to move their business forward in an online capacity. And I think what's unique about the story here from a technology standpoint and also from a Kentico standpoint is certainly a public web presence that was very much sort of marketing and communications driven was a big part of it. But as it turns out, we really leveraged Kentico as an enterprise platform to help produce a whole business-to-business component of this website, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit of detail going forward.
So, well, I guess I'm absolutely interested. So I remember fudge as a kid. It was something we always ate on vacation. So how did you guys, when you think about the brand, what kinds of things did you do to help them kind of drive their brand?
Well, the thing with Calico is they have no visibility at the consumer level. They don't produce fudge and label it themselves and then distribute it through retail outlets. They're actually in the business, essentially, of getting other people into the business of fudge. So almost like a franchise model, but where actually organizations that become Calico customers, they have their own brands. They're able to essentially, white label the products, and they get the infrastructure as well as some of the raw materials for Calico. So thinking about it from a brand and business development standpoint, we need to essentially communicate current and prospective customers on the value of adding fudge to an organization's product line, or for that matter, creating a fudge-specific retail operation. But at the same time, I think that the way to get to that point was not only to sell somebody on the business case of it, but really actually to get back to the grassroots or the foundations of why one runs a fudge business, which is that, to your point, it's very much a thing of nostalgia and enjoyment for consumers. So we help Calico work through the whole question of how to position the brand and how to effectively market to potential customers and realize that potential through an online experience that sells people on the business case of fudge and encourages them to a point of contact.
When you guys usually approach content management systems, obviously the system is the end product. What kinds of things do your customers usually ask for? Is brand management a pretty common occurrance?
I think at least through the filter of taking an existing brand when it does exist, which is quite common, and figuring out how to best position it on the web, that's certainly a big part of our business. I think from that, it leads to questions of how effectively to use web and other internet-based technologies to market, to communicate, but always through the lens of making sure you've got a consistent voice with your other communications channels.
So Sean, are there any best practices, maybe people that are listening, that you would recommend around how they should think about their brand and what kinds of things they should be concerned about?
I think you need to have an honest and open web-facing experience in terms of how people perceive you online. You've got to be very direct and clear in terms of what your organization does, how either you can service a customer directly or help a customer reach their audiences more effectively. But then ultimately, I don't think it's any different than any other communications medium. It's about having a clear business objectives, knowing what audiences you want to reach, understanding really clearly what their needs and interests are, and then through our expertise, being able to formulate a web strategy that actually delivers on those requirements.
I think that's great. If we could change a little bit. Now, obviously, Calico, I understand you guys did some B2B work. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about the underlying usage of Kentico and some of the things you guys did?
Yeah, certainly. What we did with Kentico is we built a web service layer that their back office system was able to communicate to in order to control things like membership, security, content. And we also built another layer on their side where we were able to then push web actions from Kentico into the back office. We built that in such a way that they could configure it, be selective about what type of events they wanted to be notified about from the website.
That's actually really cool. Did you guys use WCF for that, or did you use the traditional ASP.NET web service layer?
We used the classic web service approach.
Okay. And then how did you guys, if you don't mind me asking, how did you handle security within that? Did you build your own security layer, or is it all behind the firewall?
Both. We have it behind the firewall, and we also have our own security layer in there as well in case we ever want to take it outside of the firewall.
As you built this out, I mean, what were some of the challenges and things you would recommend? Because obviously a lot of people are looking to build this kind of solution, and you guys have successfully done it, so we want to learn from you.
Yeah, I think specification really is key, especially whenever there's a web service. Being very, very clear on what the contract is that you're trying to build out between the two systems, especially because in this scenario, we're building one part of it. There's possibly another person building another part. So the contract is key so that both parties can get rolling with the development.
Now, did you guys do contract first development or building out the things like the WSDL, or did you keep the contract separate and just make sure they were maintained on both sides?
It was one of the first things that we specified was Having looked into what functionality was required for the project, we came up with a contract, got agreements on it, and then we could just go ahead and implement. We could mock their back office system, so we'd have something from day one we could test against, knowing that both parties are going to agree to the contract.
Now, I often get asked this question. I know it can be kind of a minefield. Did you guys use ASPX or Portal development for your Kentico side?
We use Portal because we can blend both ASPX and Portal, so we think there's a lot of advantages to that.
You know, now that you guys have completed it, I mean, B2B is obviously a huge piece of what people are looking at. Besides the contract piece, are there other areas that you would recommend people should think about?
For sure, having clear specifications and absolute clarity on requirements up front is definitely the first piece of the puzzle. I think one of the big lessons learned for us on this project, too, is that as far as actually how you then do the development and how ultimately you deliver a product, there are a few things that really stood out. One is that quite often, as was the case in this instance, you're rarely as a web implementer going to be developing this solution on your own. You're going to be partnering with people that know the back office systems extremely well, and in most cases are going to ultimately be the authoritative voice for how that side of the solution gets implemented. Really making sure that a collaborative process is in place so that you're essentially working at one team with your other partners, I think is vital, and that certainly helped us a lot in this implementation. That having been said, I think because it's such a complicated effort integrating disparate systems, not only having clarity at the specification level, but then having a process in place so that when you do development, you're able to constantly challenge the assumptions in your specs is also critical. So for us, early on, we essentially modeled the third party or the back office part of our web services handshake as a way for us to do development and our initial testing. But then we also learned that the difference between that and working with real data, communicating with real web services on the other side is often something quite different. And what, in this case, I think really saved us from, in some cases, getting into real technological snake pits was not only our specs, but we also had very clear test plans. So we built out some test suites. We sort of set up a QA process, and then ultimately we also tested using real data as opposed to data that matched our spec, because surprise, surprise, back office often spat out stuff that the specifications never accounted for.
How did you guys do your QA and your testing? Did you use Visual Studio, Team System? Did you write your own?
From the perspective of the code base, we did unit testing on our custom libraries. For that, we used NUnit. We had a separate environment for integration testing that we're now rolling into JetBrains TeamCity, which is a continuous integration server. That's being rolled out before we start phase 2. We did develop some custom tools for testing due to the distributed nature of the integration requirement. What we built was a test harness so that we could test our code and monitor its performance against the various endpoints. These endpoints could be our mock of the back office system, or the client's development environment of that system, and obviously the live build as well when we got to that point. The tool we built was a WinForm application that allowed you to select the test or unit test. For example, that could be a SOAP message that you could then perform the call against the various endpoint and then view the XML result. This came in really handy near the end of the project when last minute changes were being made. We could run through all the test cases to ensure that a change in one part of the solution hadn't had a knock-on effect and, say, breaking the contract elsewhere. From the perspective of QA and UAT, we used a tool called TestDrill, which is developed by Gurok Software. This is a web-based tool that allows all project members, developers, PMs, or stakeholders to build out tests and monitor their success or failure rate. The benefit of this was that all parties could then see when we were at 100% success on a various requirements and consequently sign off on UAT. I think
the other thing, too, I'd add about that was very advantageous was given that the work effort on our end, on the website, and on the back office, they were essentially quite comparable in scope. We faced a scenario of how do we manage the timeline, because timeline pressures on this project were quite large. There was a desire to get to market as soon as possible. Having us build our own mock of the web service interface on the other end so that essentially we could test our own code as we were developing it was a huge advantage. Otherwise, essentially, we would have had to wait quite late in the process to see how the handshake between the remote system and ours would actually function.
One of the big things I know, obviously, I hear a lot from customers is the idea of, how do you build out your test cases? Did you guys have any kind of best practices that you worked on that evolved out of this project around what things you would recommend customers build test cases around?
Yeah, I think we definitely, learned a lot from this project with regards to QA and testing, and just being able to obviously trace functional requirements to use cases, to test cases, to, the success or failure, being able to go the whole way across that spectrum. Definitely from a user acceptance standpoint, it's a really great process, and it's something that we'll be putting into our future projects as well.
It's always something I hear a lot of customers talk about, but obviously with the time constraints I think that customers always have, it doesn't always kind of get fully thought through, and it sounds like you guys really thought that through. Did the constraints have any problems on your test cases?
Yeah, I think that the reality is that integration can be very complicated, and in this case it was, and doing integration at the same time that you're trying to push something to market as quickly as possible is always a dangerous combination. I think just to reiterate some of what Michael said, having a clear specification, having a really clear test plan in place, and executing that test plan in full, and then ultimately building into your cycle as soon as humanly possible the ability to jump from a sort of an abstract test suite to actually testing live integration is really critical. And if you don't have the time to do those things, then frankly you really need to consider being realistic with the client and yourselves about when something is going to be ready to go live. I think to our credit and the client's credit, we recognized in some of the later stages of the cycle in particular that we frankly needed a bit more time to complete. And we took that time and we completed QA and UAT with a high degree of detail. And when we went live, surprisingly to some degree, we went live with really no integration issues post-launch at all. And that, I think, is a pretty remarkable outcome given the task at hand.
Wow, that's actually huge. Every integration project I've been involved with, there's always issues that pop up, and it sounds like your testing was effective, which is, I think, fantastic.
Yeah, and certainly there's a few warts still on the beast, but really to be able to go live and have a business-to-business product, these systems in place, running effectively was really gratifying.
Wow. Well, congratulations on the project. Just from what you've told me and what I've read, it sounds like it was a fantastic project. I switch topics a little bit. What are your guys' favorite features in Kentico? I mean, what things do you like? What things don't you like?
I'll maybe talk about it from more of a business perspective, and Michael can certainly articulate the developer and technology side of it. For me, having come from a technology background, but ultimately being very much a generalist, focused on the creative and business challenges, Kentico, by far and away, is the most productive CMS I've ever worked with, from the standpoint of being able to build solutions that meet client needs and end user needs, and also deliver an experience for organizations in terms of content management and website management that's both comprehensive in terms of feature suites, configurability, and options, but usability. And usability for me is massive because we've spent much time working with other technologies in our past lives, both here at ECA and at other companies, where technology, frankly, is often not the facilitator, but the roadblock. We rarely have that kind of a challenge with Kentico. And to Kentico's credit as well, when other clients or ourselves, we run into any challenges with the technology, you folks are right there to support us, whether it's through training, technical consultation, or even just the general pick up the phone, send an email. You folks are very easy to work with and very responsive to needs.
Great. What kind of things from a business side would you recommend we could improve? I mean, I think it's always, I love the great feedback, but is there anything that you would recommend that we should look at improving?
I think some of the initiatives that are currently underway are definitely the right ones in terms of focus. Kentico, and more, I think, is becoming a credible product in the business and enterprise environment. And for a company like ourselves that more and more are targeting those kinds of organizations, that's great. But with that comes, I think, different obligations and requirements from a CMS vendor. The first one is being able to offer true enterprise support, 24/7, 365, which I believe is on the horizon from you folks.
Well, we just announced it actually about 3 days ago.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a leading question, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah, that will make a big difference. In North America, too, I think, we are the center of the universe. Sorry, everyone else off the continent. And pardon the joke, because that really is a joke. It certainly helps in terms of the sales cycle to be able to communicate that both the support infrastructure and the sales infrastructure and the training is in place here on sort of home turf, so to speak. So I think as well the initiatives to get authorized training out there, having more partners able to deliver on it, bolstering the support side of the business is great. I think those are things that are definitely in the right direction. Possibly some differentiation in terms of at the product level where more enterprise-like features start to come on stream that we can actually value price or sort of add on in terms of an offering will also be helpful. Just to come full circle on that, I think it's extremely good that Kentico has price competitive offerings vis-a-vis other CMSs. As a development shop, we have clients of all sizes, and a large part of our business is in the arts and culture, not-for-profit space. And frankly, the stressors on budget and ongoing costs are high with those types of groups. And being able to offer a commercial CMS that still has the full professional support, but at a very attractive price point, is very valuable for us, and I'm sure it would be for many other companies. But at the same time, being able to offer more enterprise-specific features and functions, even if they come in at an added cost, I think will help us be able to sell Kentico into markets where it certainly deserves to be, but perhaps it's still a bit of a learning curve or a work effort to get there.
No, that's great. Now, Michael, what are your favorite and least favorite features of Kentico?
I think from a developer's perspective, one of my favorite things about Kentico is that as a framework, it just doesn't get in my way. If there are custom things that need to be built, they're very easy to integrate into the system. I think the open API and the extensibility really are, one of the biggest strong features of the platform. Certainly for the Calico Cottage gig, the global event handler, as an example, really does give us an awful lot of areas where we can tie our code into the system and then integrate that with back office. So that's definitely one of my favorite features. Also, it was for team development as well. Like we've been using the portal version now, really exclusively with Ecentricarts, and it is a really, really good way of developing for front-end developers and back-end developers, and we can give out different responsibilities across using that platform. So it's very good in that way. Least favorite feature, it's hard to say. A lot of the things that I've had a few grumbles with are getting fixed in version 6 or becoming features in version 6. For example, the hierarchical categorization and taxonomy, I believe, is coming out. That would be about the only thing. Also, the API can be a bit data set heavy, but I think link support is coming in version 6 as well.
Yep. Okay.
It might be in part sort of the learning curve we're still on large complex projects, but to some degree, syncing updates from one environment to another. I know improvements are coming in the web farm and the various synchronization features in the products, but certainly it's quite a bit of heavy lifting to make major updates from your dev to stage QA and production. That's somewhere where we're hoping some of the version 6 will help streamline the process even further.
Okay. No, that's all fair feedback. One of the things that I know a lot of developers listening and even business folks listening, they're always looking for more information. I mean, where would you guys recommend that people read, whether it's blogs or websites to help keep up to date? What kinds of resources would you recommend?
Well, the new www.ecentricarts.com website will be full of all kinds of That's interesting. No, seriously. I think it depends on what the question is. If it's specifically looking to find out more information on Kentico, certainly there's an active community out there, and all you need to do is spend a bit of time on Google to see who's blogging and who's talking the most and who's the most authoritative. From a business standpoint, to be quite honest, I still find the resources out there are few and far between. I think that there's frankly a gap that maybe we and other developers need to be working on, which is to talk about web technology and CMS from a standpoint of really what business users need and what end users need. So that's to me a non-answer to your question.
No. Well, that's okay. I mean,
from Michael's standpoint, I'm sure he's got other thoughts.
Yeah, there's a million websites out there. I think you can't go wrong with Stack Overflow, just as a general resource if you have any questions on any computer language. I think it's really good. And blogs as well, like Scott Guthrie, other .NET developers are good places to go to learn new features. Old school as well, I like to read books. I think Rocks make excellent learning books for languages and development. Wiley as well, they do some good stuff.
Excellent. Okay. We're starting to run out of time. We get towards the end. For those people listening, how can they get in touch with you guys?
You can reach us online at www.ecentricarts.com, which is like being eccentric, but with just one C. And you can also reach us on Twitter at Ecentricarts, and you can also give us a shout anytime, 416-644-5000. And if you want to be specific, you can talk to me at extension 224.
Excellent. All right. Well, I want to thank you guys very much for joining me today. I appreciate it. And you guys have a great day.
Cheers, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.